Thanks so much for coming to the first, institutional change at Stanford event. I want to encourage you all to grab food if you want. It's really good, super tasty, menu looks great. And get settled, right? We noticed that no one's sitting near the front, and we don't bite non-consensually, so we'll be fine, right? Everyone's gonna be okay here. It's gonna be a great event. Okay, so I'm gonna kick this off with a brief introduction. I'm gonna talk a bit about myself and how this event came about, and then Persis is going to do the second half of the introduction to this event, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started. Sound good to everyone? Great, perfect. This is so exciting. Okay, so hi, my name's Zheng. I am a senior and co-term. My bachelor's is in psychology, and my co-term is in sociology. I am a writer for the Stanford Daily. Some of y'all might have read my stuff. Yeah, and so I'll talk a little bit about this event. And to start this story requires going back a little bit. I've been a student activist for pretty much the entire length of time that I've been at Stanford. And so for the past 4 years, I've really seen a lot of changes, I think, from how things have gone on this campus, especially during 2015, as most of us know, right, during the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement to divest from occupied Palestine, among many others. There was a pretty charged atmosphere on this campus, right, of politicization, of action, of activism. And from that, I got really involved in student activism at the time. And, you know, if there's nothing else you take away from this, it's that it was a hell of a time, right? Like, those were intense times. I can't, count the number of nights we spent, huddled together, talking about strategy, talking about planning, talking about, what do we shut down, what do we protest, what do we do, right? And those remain some of the most thrilling, charged experiences of my undergraduate experience. And the atmosphere at the time was, in many ways, somewhat desperate, right? It was the world is falling apart, right? The university is in crisis, we are in crisis, right? This is a state of emergency. And from that, right, we really sought to have Stanford, right, our home, reflect this kind of, these ideals of justice and equity that we were promoting among, our student movements. And so in those times, right, there were intense conflicts between students and administrators, right? I remember writing an article in the Daily called Provosts and Purple Pros Against Dialogue, right? It remains one of the most widely liked articles that I've written, and I'm somewhat embarrassed about it now that I'm standing here and, working with a provost, but times change, right? But at the time, right, I think the feeling in activist spaces was that all we want, right, is recognition, right? Like, we want, as student activists, to feel heard, right? We want to feel like this university is a place that is welcoming for us and that will be here for us and that will help us, right, as we try to make our world the place that we want it to be. And at the time, right, I'm sad to say that wasn't what happened, right? There were intense tensions, and there were, failures of communication, right? And so among student activists, we really felt like Stanford was evil, right? Like, big S Stanford was big E evil, right? All of it was evil. And we were, these kind of freedom fighters embedded in this organization of destruction, and we would bring it down from within and kind of rise and set everything on fire, and everything would be great. That was generally the feeling, right? And then the year after, right, the movements sort of subsided a little bit. We had Who's Teaching Us, right, which was a new student movement. And I started working in the diversity and first gen office and with the Wyland Health Initiative. And so my work in there really worked with creating resources for queer and trans students on campus. If y'all have seen the little brochures flying around, you know, the best practices for faculty and staff, and the coming out brochures, that's some of the resources that I helped create and gather. And I think in the process of that work, what was really striking to me was I started learning things about the institution, right? Big I, institution, that were never apparent to me as a student activist, right? I started learning that Stanford is actually decentralized, right? Who knew, right? Not all administrators kind of live in the same little box and make decisions by consensus about how to best oppress the student body. Surprise, right? So, and during that process, right, of kind of getting to work with different parts of campus, I started realizing how big this place is, right? It's really big, right? Like there are people on one side of campus that not only don't talk to people on the other side, but don't even know that they exist, right? And this is par for the course. Stanford is huge. It's so decentralized, and there's so much work that goes into communication, collaboration, resource building, event organizing, right? Even this event right here, right? Like this event, like I would say just having us all in this room is like a feat of engineering, right? Like this itself, this is a big deal, right? It's like how often do you see this many administrators and students and staff and alum and faculty in a room together, right? Eating good breakfast, right? This is great. Like I'm really hyped. So yeah, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but I think a big question that I've asked myself a lot is why am I here right now, right? Like why am I standing here talking about institutional change and working with the provost, you know, working with Persis, and I think the question that my answer to that question is that the myths that I think I internalized about institutional change at Stanford, I realized that they were myths, right? And Persis will talk about this a little later, right? But I had really internalized this model that if you just shout loud enough, right? If you bash your head against a wall loud enough, right? You can make this entire institution, right? Like bow down to your demands and set everything on fire and everything will be great, right? And I think the process of, you know, working in this university has convinced me that the work is much harder than we thought it would be, right? But the potential for change is also much higher than we thought it would be, paradoxically. And so I asked myself, right, not what do I want, but where do I belong? What can I do? What is my role in this university? What am I best at, right? And where am I needed? And so I think that's why I'm here right now, is because I met Persis, right? We talked, we had a really good conversation, and we decided that this event is what's needed right now, right? And we are at a really great crossroads, I think, at Stanford, right? Like we're at a place where more students than ever, I think, or for a while, are politicized, right? Have this atmosphere of wanting to contribute to activism, wanting to make this campus better, wanting to make the world better, right? Through service, through action, through direct action. And there's real knowledge here, right? Like this university holds so much institutional knowledge. And I think we're at a place where we can connect these two different groups, right? We can connect the institutional knowledge of this university with the passion and the intensity of students and student activists. And so, right, the aim, I think, of this event, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Persis, but the aim of this event is to create activists, right? We are trying to create more activists, but not just create people that can make change, but create people that can make change effectively and do it well and work well in this environment, right? And to know, right, what to hit and who to talk to and what things to propose and when to propose and how to propose it. This is big stuff, right? And I hope that over the course of this event, you know, we can learn together and grow together and really kind of center this idea that we are here, all of us, right, to learn and to become more effective towards this larger idea, right, of institutional change at Stanford that I'm sure everyone in this room, like, truly believes in. So, yeah, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Persis.
So thank you, Lily, and thank you all for coming and for participating in this. There's been a lot of energy around the planning of this workshop and optimism, I would say, about what could happen as a result. And I have to just tell you, it has been one of the most fun things that I've been doing in my new role as provost. So there's just a couple of points I want to add to Lily's introduction. The first is about trust. So, trust among the stakeholders is a really fundamental and important part of any institutional change. In fact, it's a fundamental part of institutional health. You can have all the governance structures and procedures and policies, but if stakeholders don't trust each other, you're paralyzed. It's very hard to make anything happen. And you have to trust processes and have faith in the outcome of the change process, because you'll never be able to control all parts of it. Now, I know we have a trust issue here at Stanford. We have a trust issue between students and the administration. I think we have broader trust issues than that, frankly, but given the audience here today, I'm going to focus on trust between students and the administration. And it's something that I personally think both we have to make better. I also think we can make it better. I actually think it'll be a fun journey. But I'm going to start right now by saying this workshop and the way that I and the other administrators and staff in this room are going to interact with you today is actually a statement of personal trust. We hope we can have real conversations. And we struggled with the idea of we want to have very open, honest conversations, but we also want the idea of this workshop to be open and accessible. So we made a compromise where we're recording the morning sessions, and then those are going to be posted to the web, so I want you all to know that. And then in the afternoon, we will stop the recording, because we're going to put you to work almost immediately, but the real work will go on in the afternoon, and we just don't want that to be fettered by any sense that somebody's listening in. So we're recording the morning. It'll be posted off the Provost website. All of the materials will be posted. We do have members of the Daily here, but I do look forward to respectful conversations. I don't want you to feel constrained, but it's important to be transparent. So we tried to strike this balance. And I think we'll both learn from each other in this process. I didn't have any problem getting a pack of, if you don't mind my referring to you as a pack, of administrators here this morning to participate. They eagerly volunteered. In fact, they even were volunteering things before they knew what we were going to ask them to do. And with trust and hard work, which absolutely does not mean we agree all the time, I think we will make Stanford a better institution, and that's the shared goal. So my second point is actually a sobering one. Okay? Institutional change is hard, and institutional change is slow. People don't like change. I think that's actually fundamental to human nature, and institutions are made of people, so institutions don't like change. Now, I think it's very human to enjoy telling others, you need to change. Okay? We all enjoy that. But we don't like to change ourselves. And so whenever you're trying to change something, it's really important we understand why we are changing. That's the first question we always have to ask. And you just can't make substantial change by ordering or demanding that somebody else do something. Now, there's two fundamental ways to participate in institutional change. One is you can stand on the outside and you can shine a spotlight on what needs fixing. And that is actually an important role. It's not the most satisfying role, in my opinion, because you actually have very little influence on the changes that actually happen, and you don't get the satisfaction of making it happen. But it is an important role. The other role is you engage in the process of change and of fixing the institution. And today, the goal is to give you the tools to be able to do that and engage in the process of institutional change at Stanford. And I think you should know that we are working institutionally to figure out how to engage students more effectively in change at Stanford. So it's both education on student side, education on the administration side, and I'll tell you why I think that's so important in a minute. Third point, and Lily made a reference to this, there is a mythology around change. And then there is the reality of change. The mythology of change is that one person, one event, one dramatic moment can result in institutional change, dramatic, major institutional change. One person, one moment. Doesn't work that way. Just doesn't work that way. Change is slow, and really significant institutional change can be measured on timelines of years, not hours and days or even months. Now, I just have to tell you, I don't like the mythology. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep us away from that mythology. And I'm going to tell you the fundamental reason that I don't like the mythology, and then I'm going to tell you a funny anecdote that I just heard this morning. So the reason I don't like the mythology at a very deep personal level is I've actually become in some ways a subject for a particular myth. And so I know personally how uncomfortable that is. So you don't know all my history, but I was director up at the SLAC National Accelerator Lab. And there is a myth about what I did as director of SLAC. And I find that myth demeaning. It's actually kind of demeaning to me in some way, but it's certainly demeaning to all the work that so many people put in to make change happen up at that institution. And it's really quite misleading. So it's personally very uncomfortable. The fact is, a huge institutional shift was made up at SLAC. There was a major mission change, there was a rebuilding of the workforce, there was a reframing of the governance, there was groundbreaking technical accomplishment. And the myth is that Persis was the leader who made it happen, and it wasn't. It was a wonderful, very diverse team, diverse in background, diverse in approach, diverse in the way they thought about problems, that together accomplished what I do think are miracles, but miracles no one group even, and certainly no one person could have accomplished. So I really hate myths, and the reality is just so much better, which is I've participated in a lot of very significant institutional change. It's thrilling, and the best part of it is the broad teamwork that is needed to make it happen. That's the fun part. Working together with a broad, diverse team with really challenged different points of view and making something happen is about the most fun thing I've ever done. So now the funny anecdote about how myths get started is, as some of you may know, there was a little demonstration during Admit Weekend when I was on the stage, and some students came in very quietly, respectfully from behind me and came and sat on the stage with some signs. Fine. But I got asked this morning from somebody who said, I heard the students charge the stage and grabbed the mic. Okay, not even close. They were respectful, polite, they had a point of view they wanted to express. But the myth goes on. So, final point. Why are we doing this now? So one of the reasons we're doing it now is because Lily and I had this conversation back in February, and I'm a brand new provost, and I'm looking for things to do. But I actually think it's really important to be talking about change at Stanford, because I think there's a very important window of opportunity, and you heard that from Lily. Stanford needs to change. Why? Why does Stanford need to change? Well, I can state with 100% certainty that the great research university that is the #1 pick of all undergraduates in the country and many, many graduate students looks different in the future than it looks today. If we stay the same, and complacency is always a real danger at big institutions because they don't like change. Remember, going back to my first comments? If we stay the same, we will not be the great university of 20 years from now that undergraduates want to come to and graduate students want to come to. Now, I don't know what the future looks like, but we need to figure out how to get there. So today, Stanford is the most attractive university to students in the country. After all, you all came here for a reason, right? You chose to come to Stanford. But if we stay the same, we won't be attractive to the outstanding students of the future. The world is changing, our students are changing. We need to change and evolve with them. Our students and many of our younger colleagues are impatient for change, and we can capture that impatience in a positive way. Change may be slow, but impatience is critical. And if we don't start to change, we might lose our way. The administration and the faculty govern the institution with the Board of Trustees as oversight. We're going to tell you a lot about that. But if we get too far out of alignment with students, you're the mission, we're in trouble. And also, as Lily said, we want our students to change. We want you to be change agents in the world. And we want you to be activists. We need you to have the tools to be effective. And engaging and changing Stanford will be part of that. So I'm going to end with a quick personal anecdote, which is I grew up on this campus. So you guys know where the Munger dorms are, right? Okay. Corner of Campus Drive and Alvarado. That's the corner of the Munger dorm complex. Okay. I grew up on that corner. That's where the house was. Some of the trees in the Munger dorm complex are the trees that were in my backyard growing up, okay? And actually, my house is now a university building, so you can go see it if you want. It's kind of a weird house, but it was a time of great turmoil when I was growing up on campus. I think 1970 was the peak of the violence. Buildings were burned, including the president's office, which was destroyed. There were dozens of students and police injured. The biggest focus, I mean, it was the time of the Vietnam War, but the specific focus of the disputes on the campus had to do with classified research going on campus, and the relationship with SRI was severed at that time, and new policies put in place, so we don't do classified research. My memories of the time are of the violence, riot police that we had to pass on the way to school, tear gas, and fear. Actually, a high school classmate was shot in the leg outside our backyard. But I also remember hours of discussion that took place in our backyard late into the night with my dad, other faculty, the ASSU presidents of the time, other students interested in issues of social justice, university reform, arms control, the future of the planet. Stanford was fundamentally changed in those years, and I think it was changed for the better. So we have that opportunity for change again. I don't want to miss it, and that is what this day is about. So with those comments, we are ready to embark on our first exercise. I'm looking for Derica. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, and now, well, come on, I don't care that we're unable to connect. Okay. Oh, all right. Hold on. I'm just going to put the agenda up here. Okay. Why are we here, Derica?
Thank you so much. As has been said, my name is Derica Blackman, and I'm Associate Dean and Director of the Diversity and First Gen Office. I use she and they pronouns, and I am super excited to be here. I first want to thank Lily for having the vision and foresight to say this was something that we needed to do, and the typical Lily perseverance to make sure it actually happened. Lily is one of the first people in the university to push me to rethink how I show up. And so I'm really grateful that we've evolved into the relationship that we have. I also want to thank Persis, who had the vision and foresight to say yes, and to step up in a way that I have rarely seen in a new leader. And so there's been a lot of listening and pushing. And I think that's a wonderful combination, so I'm grateful to be here to just support this process. And of course, we are so excited that you came. There's always this nervousness, even for us, that it's like, will people show up? So we're grateful both to the administrators, the staff, the alum, and of course the students, that this was something that interested you enough to come for a whole day. So it's a very high bar for us. So we want to jump in. My task is to really get your voice into the conversation. I always think the most interesting conversations are the ones you want to have. And so the team has been very clear that we want this day to be a day of engagement about you and your ideas. So we're going to get you moving. I am going to ask everyone to stand. I've been recently trained at the D School, so if you know anything about the D School, I hear a lot of laughter. We're going to be standing, there's Post-its, all of that will happen. So what we're going to ask everyone to do is to find someone they don't know well to be their partner. Ago. For those who don't know, ago is an Akan word. I love the people who know are like smiling really big. Ago is an Akan word that means, are you listening? And the proper response is ame, which means, yes, I am listening. Ago? Fabulous. It's my call to order. My daughter says I never go anywhere without it. So what we're going to ask you to do in just a minute, and I love that you're so excited to talk to each other, is we're going to ask you to tell the story of your name to your partner. And it can be any story that comes to mind. I've asked two people to model this for us. And Jennifer, if you will, tell the story of your name.
So my name is Jennifer, and I have no story of my name.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, fabulous.
All there is to it. Name that happened to be a popular one.
Fabulous, thank you. I specifically asked Jennifer to share because I didn't want this to be an intimidating exercise where you felt like you had to have a deep and powerful story about your name. I also asked Lily if Lily would share the story of her name. Thank you. Thank you so much. So now it's your turn. You're going to have 5 minutes, which is roughly 2.5 minutes each, to tell each other the story of your name. And then we're going to invite people who want to share back a little. Well, actually, we have one more question. First, let's start with the story of your name, and I'll give you about 5 minutes before I call you back to order. So I love that there's so much enthusiasm to talk to each other. And I think one of the great things about a day like this is the opportunity to get to know people you don't know. So I'm going to invite you to find another partner that you don't know for a second conversation. No, different question. I'm going to give the question in a second.
I don't have a partner, so I'm going to come
Is there someone who doesn't have a partner? Right there. Ah, okay, fabulous. Go. Fantastic. All right. So the second question we want to engage is we really want to know why you came. It's a pretty big commitment, a pretty long day. And we want to know what motivated you to come out and engage with this topic. And there is no right answer. It's just a simple way to have you reflect and share with your partner why you came today. All right, you have 8 minutes for this, so feel free to talk a little longer. Just give you a few moments to wrap that last thought. Okay, fabulous. Well, we want to thank you all for sharing your story with people that you didn't know, and for reflecting a little bit on what are the different motivations for people for being here, and what are some of what people really want to know about the university. It's really the intention for this entire day for us to explore how institutional change happens, where are the seats of power. We're really going to map all of that. And one of the things that I've learned in my time here, and Lily actually wrote an article about it this week, is that I'm an alum, class of 91, and I shared with Persis. She came into my office and saw the clipping from me in the daily with my mouth open and my fist up like this. And I definitely was one of those people, as many of our activist students are, who started with what I call the outside game. And Lily's article was called The Inside-Outside Game, which is a thing I like to talk about a lot of times because I think we sometimes forget that most change has happened through allyship between people on the outside and people on the perceived inside, and that shared interests. So what we want to talk about today is what are the different roles. I love what Persis says, that impatience is important, right? And institutional change is hard. So how do we think about nurturing one without canceling out the other? So I think today is going to be a really exciting experience of bringing students together to really actually give you insight into the power structure at Stanford, and give you an opportunity to grapple with that and see what kind of change you can make. And I think the real testimony to this kind of activity is that we're saying we want change, right, as administrators. And we want to make it accessible for you to make those changes and to give you the information from the inside about how that happens. Because it is frustrating as an activist. I'll tell a quick story because I'm a little bit under time. I was involved in the movement for justice after Oscar Grant was killed in Oakland, California. And there was a lot of protesting and some rioting, and, well, there was some civil disobedience, I think, depending on how you describe what happened. And one of the most important and little-known things about that moment was that we joined with an alum of Stanford, Taj James, and his Movement Strategy Center. And we actually sat down and had a strategy session about how we were going to impact change. And at the time, Jerry Brown was the Attorney General in the state of California, but had already expressed his intention to run for governor. As Attorney General, you are the top police officer in the state. He also had been the former mayor of Oakland, where all of this happened. And we knew that it would be negative for his campaign if his former city went up in smoke, right, over this incident, and as the top police officer. So Jerry Brown was actually the focal point of many of our efforts. And between the first week, where we had our first protest, and the second week, which I called for the protest to be moved at City Hall, Jerry Brown, allegedly, got on the phone and called and insisted that the police officer involved be charged with murder. A homicide charge at that time had almost never happened for an on-duty police officer. Now we're grappling with that much more frequently. And you can look into the details of the story. But that would not have happened had we not had people to sit us down and analyze where is power and potential influence in this situation. Now this isn't an opportunity for me to endorse or not endorse any political stance that I've ever taken in the past. I'm sure many of you would agree or disagree with those campaigns. But I wanted to give you an insight, both for those of you who who are activists and for those of you who are in this role today as coaches, that understanding is really how we become more effective. So I just wanted to stop there and thank you again for sharing and letting me share with you. And then I think we are going to start that analysis of power by bringing Stephanie Kalfayan up, who's going to share with us how power works in the university. Thank you, Stephanie.
Let me get you set up here. All right. Yeah, good moment to grab food, coffee. And here is looking in the black box.
It is that. Okay. So I think we all agree that this is a large and complicated place. And so going through this is necessarily going to take some time. And I'm going to try to speak as quickly as I can and only dwell on a few topics that I think are particularly important. And of course, I'm happy to answer questions as you need. Before we talk about governance at Stanford, I think it's important to think about what some governance models are. You just easily can think of a few. Dictatorship, where one person has all the power and authority. A democracy in its purest form, where every single person has a voice. Hard to govern, but that is that way. Corporate governance models balance the interests of various stakeholders. So you have shareholders, management, customers, financiers, suppliers, and so forth. And the model is set up to balance that. And the university has a shared governance model. So the governance is shared between the faculty, the administration, and the board of trustees. And you'll notice students are not part of that actual governance structure, and yet they are the reason that we are here. We wouldn't have founded, this university would not have been founded were it not for the students. So you are our mission, but not part of the formal governance structure. What I'm going to do today is talk about a few things, 2 governance documents, the founding grant and the Articles of Organization of the Academic Council. I'm going to go over the academic organization of the university and talk about a few processes that are important to the way the university operates. I think many of you know the story of the history of Stanford. Jane and Leland Stanford lost their only child, Leland Jr., to typhoid fever when he was a few days shy of his 16th birthday. They were in Florence. For those of you who go to Florence, there's actually a plaque on the building where they were when Leland died. Within a few weeks of his death, and this is always stunning to me as a parent, to think about the way these 2 parents took their grief. Within a few weeks, they decided they were going to do something for other people's children. And what they decided to do was to create a great university. They weren't going to create just any university. They wanted to create a great university, a university of high degree. From its founding, Stanford was non-denominational and coeducational. And that was very unusual for a private institution founded at this time. In addition to using their personal wealth, including all of Jane's jewels, which she sold to build the buildings on this campus, to build the main quad, the Stanfords deeded the rights to their farm, their Palo Alto farm, to the university with the express provision that continues today that it may not be sold. This is really very important. From 1885 until 1903, the founders held all the power at the university. They were in charge of the place. There were other people here, but they were in charge of the administration at Stanford. The founding grant, which is a real document, it exists, set forth the role of the Board of Trustees, the powers of the president, and the roles and responsibilities of the faculty. This is the 8,000 acres that the Stanfords donated. Our land is in 2 counties, Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. It abuts 5 different municipalities. Most of the core campus is in unincorporated Santa Clara County, but the medical center, part of the medical center, the shopping center, and the research park are in Palo Alto. So the Board of Trustees, according to the founding grant, the board is the custodian of the endowment and all the university properties. They invest, they manage the invested fund, they set the budget, and determine policies for operation and control of the university. Today's board approves tuition, room and board fees. They approve the university's budget. They approve the construction of every new building on campus. They approve money that we borrow, and they approve the way we invest the endowment. Power given to the Board of Trustees is to hire and fire a president. The Board of Trustees has the fiduciary responsibility that the university will continue in perpetuity. That is an exceedingly long frame of reference, okay? That is very different from all of us in this room, and it's really very different from students. I mean, we have students who are here from 1 year, like Juliana, who I was talking to before, to people, PhD students who are here for 6, 7, 8 years. So the board is thinking intergenerationally. Every decision they make is not a decision for tomorrow, it's a decision for 20 years from now, and 30 years from now, and 100 years from now. The board has a maximum of 38 members, and they meet 5 times a year, and they do a lot of their work in committees. The president of the university, this is a picture of the pioneer faculty on the steps of Encina Hall. You'll see it's not a very large group, but there were 2 women in that first group. They're there about midway through the picture. The president can only be appointed or removed by the Board of Trustees. The founding grant gave the president the powers listed here to prescribe the duties of professors and teachers, to remove professors and teachers at will, to prescribe and enforce the course of study and the mode and manner of teaching. This is the original founding grant, and such other powers as will enable him to control the educational part of the university. The president was accountable for everything that happened here. When this founding grant was enacted and the president was hired, the then president of Harvard University, Charles Eliot, expressed his thoughts about this, and he said, "What an extremely disagreeable and inexpedient power of dismissal the Stanfords forced on the president of their university. For all I know, it may well work in a railroad, but it will certainly be inconvenient and injurious in a university." And this is important to remember. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the academic organization beyond the president. There's the provost, the executive cabinet, the advisory board, and the Senate of the Academic Council. This is really stunning. 5 years after its founding, the faculty had quadrupled, and so did the number of women on the faculty. There are about 8 women there seated on what looks like the curb of one of our main quad buildings. With the front row of men have their feet in the dirt where we have pavers today. So this is the current president's organization chart. You'll see he has a set of vice presidents who are in charge of a lot of operations at the university. This chart is found in the administrative guide if anybody wants to see it. And for all of you, I forgot to mention, there are slides right on your table. They're turned over in the middle, but you can pick them up and there are more over there if you need them. The president is the only officer of the university whose role was specified in the founding grant. The provost is the chief academic and budget officer of the university. The provost administers the entire academic program of instruction and research. The provost oversees services, student affairs, admissions, financial aid, the libraries, religious life. The provost oversees the budget planning process, the capital planning process, and oversees faculty appointments and allocation of resources, the billets that go under the faculty members. The first provost at Stanford was Douglas Whitaker, and he served as provost for 3 years from 1952 until 1955. Persis Drell is our 13th provost. While the president's role was specified in the founding grant, the provost derives her authority from the president, who delegates to her. This is the provost organization chart, slightly more dense than the president's, overseeing a lot of functions, as you can see. Those individuals who are outlined in a double blue make up the executive cabinet. The executive cabinet is the academic leadership team who help the president and provost run the university. These people are the deans of the 7 schools. Jennifer Whittam is one of our deans, Dean of School of Engineering, and she's here with us today. It includes the directors of SLAC and the Hoover Institution, Vice Provost and Dean of Research, and our 2 Vice Provosts for Undergraduate Education and Graduate Education, and Patty Gumport is here today. So these are the people, key leaders across the university who are in charge. These 2 org charts are the administration. You recall that I mentioned Jane and Leland Stanford held most of the administrative power at Stanford. And once Leland Sr. passed away, Jane Stanford was the person in charge. In 1900, Jane asked First President David Starr Jordan to fire a faculty member. That was part of the responsibility the founding grant gave to the president, to fire a faculty member, and she asked him to fire Edward Ross. Edward Ross was politically active. He had 2 particular viewpoints that were not favorable in Jane's eyes. He favored limits on Japanese immigration, and he favored municipal ownership of utilities. And if you recall, the Stanfords made their fortune on private ownership of a railroad. So this was not something that, was Jane thought was a great idea. So Jordan did fire Edward Ross, and an outcry followed. 7 of the Stanford faculty resigned, and the Ross affair at that time became a battle cry across the entire country for academic freedom. There were a few other faculty dismissals at that time, no others that received the same kind of national notoriety, but it ultimately led Jane to think maybe we need to rethink the organization of the university a little bit. And she designated a committee that was led by Horace Davis and George Carruthers. George Carruthers was the first university alum to serve on our board of trustees. And they recommended a restructuring of the organization of the university and a shift in the balance of power from this strong executive in the president to one that gave the faculty some power, against the power of the administration and the Board of Trustees. So what they did, this committee drafted something called the Articles of Organization of the Faculty, and part of it recommended the formation of an executive committee. That executive committee is now called the Advisory Board, and they advise the president on matters of importance. So in the early years, they talked about things like welfare of students, creation of departments and faculty appointments. In the middle of the 20th century, they actually talked about parking and transportation on campus. But most of their effort is focused on hiring faculty and, in the rare case, firing a faculty member. They currently advise on appointments, promotions, on appeals of tenure decisions, on faculty discipline, and on the creation or elimination of departments. The faculty, the full faculty, elect the advisory board. The advisory board has the option to appeal a decision to the Board of Trustees. They have the right to go all the way up to the top. So the Academic Council was established in this other document. These two things, the founding grant and the Articles of Organization of the Faculty, are really two very important documents in this university's governance. The membership of the Academic Council are the faculty, the tenure line faculty, assistant professors, associate professors, full professors. The non-tenure line faculty, those are the professors peren teaching research, some senior fellows in specified policy centers, so CEPR, FSI, the Woods Institute. Academic Council does not include people at the Hoover Institution. It doesn't include medical center line faculty, and it doesn't include visitors. The Academic Council has full control over requirements and degree programs and academic policies at Stanford. In the early years, the Academic Council voted as a whole group, and as the faculty grew, of course, that became unwieldy, and 50 years ago, they convened the first Senate. So next year, next academic year, our faculty Senate is celebrating its 50th anniversary. They have the authority over all these things, degree programs and academic requirements. 4 times a year, they actually look at the lists of students who are expecting to graduate that quarter, and they approve those names. So for any of you here who are going to graduate in June, your name will go before the Senate, and the Senate actually has to say, yes, we approve that these people can get their degrees. The Senate works through multiple committees. The full Senate doesn't take something up that is actually the work of a committee. So for example, these are all the Senate committees. The Committee on Research might think about who should be a principal investigator at Stanford. They'll deliberate. They may decide that it should be extended a little bit. This happened a few years ago with the case of medical center line faculty. They made a recommendation. That recommendation went to the full Senate, and then the full Senate voted on it. That is that arm of leadership. I am going to talk a little bit about some processes that we go through that are important, and I'm going to try to do this really quickly. And these are the processes I'm going to talk about, and the first one is choosing a dean. There is a search committee. The search committee is co-chaired by the provost and a faculty member from the school in which we're searching. The first job of the provost, and generally the co-chair of the search committee, is to think a little bit about the school and think about, are we going to do a broad national, international search, or are we going to just look within the school? And we had to launch a very quick search this year for the dean of the School of Engineering. we thought a lot about it and said, you know, there is sufficient leadership in the school right now. We do not need to look outside. And that search committee made a recommendation, and Jennifer Whittam was named the dean. 2.5 years before, when we did a search in that same school, we thought, no, we're going to look broadly. We're going to look out around the country to see if we can find somebody. So that's the first thing that happens. The search committee is composed of faculty and some students and a staff member or two. I serve on most of these search committees. The search committee's responsibility is to go out and talk with everybody. They talk with faculty in the school, they talk with staff and with students, with colleagues around the university. How do you interact with the School of Medicine? Could something be improved? What's good about that? We talk to trustees and alums, and the end product of that search is not a single person. It's an unranked list of a few names, 3, 4 names, to the president and the provost, and the president and provost make a decision. You know, this is the white smoke emerging from our version of the Vatican. But you know, the reason that slide is there is because this is an entirely closed and secretive process, just like choosing a president. There are public universities and some private schools and colleges that have very open processes when they are searching for a president. You know, they'll bring somebody in, the mayor of the town, the city council, the Rotary Club interview, as well as everybody on campus. That is not what we do here, and the reason we do not do that is that we will not have the very best people throw their hat in the ring to take one of these jobs if they stand a possibility of losing a job they have now. I mean, in the last decade or so, we've appointed deans at Stanford who came from other universities where they were serving as provost. And those people would never have even engaged with us if they weren't assured of complete confidentiality in the process. Okay, hiring a faculty member or promoting to tenure a faculty member. All appointments of faculty originate in a department. So what that means is that Persis cannot decide she wants to hire somebody at Stanford. The Department of Chemical Engineering decides we need to do a search. We have a faculty member whose time for promotion has come up, and they appoint either a search committee or an evaluation committee. This happens in the department. The department collects evidence. In the case of a promotion, it's broad evidence. They gather 10 or more letters from experts in the field assessing that individual candidate. They collect letters from students who have been advisees or in classes with an instructor. When you get a request from a department administrator to write on behalf of a faculty member who's being promoted, you should answer that call. Those letters are taken very, very seriously in the case of a promotion to tenure. So that is a significant place where there is a student voice. So the department makes a decision. They sit down, an evaluation committee makes a decision. They make a positive recommendation. It's voted on by the entire department. And if the vote is positive, it goes to some version of a school appointments and promotions committee. Each of our 7 schools have a slightly different way they describe this committee, but basically it's a school appointments and promotions committee. And that committee thinks about the file, and it's not, you know, it's a big file. It has lots of material in it. If it's positive, if they view it positively, then it goes to the dean. They're advisory to the dean. The dean reviews that case. And then depending on the dean's point of view, if the dean is positive about it, it gets sent to the provost, who reviews the entire file again, and if the provost is positive about it, the provost sends the file to the advisory board. The advisory board was that group of 7 elected faculty that came from the origins in the Edward Ross affair. The advisory board deliberates on that appointment file, and if they're positive, they make a recommendation to the president of the university, and then the president makes a report to the board of trustees. At any point here, if there could be a negative decision and then the file doesn't move forward, negative promotion decisions can be appealed. So if they're made in the department or in the school, they're appealed to the provost. If it's a negative decision made by the provost, it's appealed to the president. Creating a degree program. Okay, so those of you who are students are expecting to receive a degree from an approved degree program. These degree programs are initiated in a department. Usually a group of faculty come together and think, we need to do X. So, for example, we have some interdisciplinary programs, the undergraduate Earth Systems program. That's a degree that's given by the School of Earth, Energy, and Environmental Science. There were faculty who were thinking, well, gee, there's nothing quite like this at Stanford. We should do this. This is the reason why we should do it. These are the courses somebody would take. And they put that proposal together, and it goes to a school curriculum committee, and then the school dean, and then from there, if the view of it is positive, it goes to one of those faculty senate committees. If it's an undergraduate degree program, it goes to the Committee on Review of Undergraduate Majors. If it's a graduate program, it goes to the Committee on Graduate Study, and then the full Senate votes on it. So, remember in 1891, the president was the one who had the authority to decide what the students would learn and what the faculty would teach. And now it's the faculty who make these proposals and the faculty who review and approve the proposals. Creating a degree program is something very separate from creating a department. So a proposal to create a department usually starts in a school. And I'm going to give you a recent example. We have a medical school, and we have had professionals in the medical school, faculty in the medical school who are specialists in emergency medicine. They've been part of the Department of Medicine, and the Department of Medicine is the largest department at this university. I think it's maybe bigger than the School of Engineering, or at least close to that. But they decided that their work would be best experienced if they were collected together as a department rather than being a subsection of the Department of Medicine. So they made a proposal to create a separate department, and that proposal was something the dean supported. It went to the provost, and the provost thought it was a great idea also, and the provost sent that proposal for a creation of a new department to the advisory board. The advisory board also opined on it and thought it was a good idea, sent it to the president, who thought it was a good idea. And I think through this process, people are looking at, does this make sense? Does it make good intellectual sense? Is this something that's going to last? And then also looking at what is the financial underpinning for this. The department wasn't created until the Board of Trustees vote on it, okay? So that's how you create a department. We have departments that don't have degree programs. About 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer than that, the School of Engineering and the School of Medicine created the bioengineering department. But at its outset, there was not an undergraduate degree program in bioengineering, and it took a few years, and then they proposed a degree program, and it went through that separate process that I had just described, where it was approved by the Senate. Okay, money. I'm almost done. So this is the consolidated budget for the current fiscal year, FY17, about $6 billion. And you'll notice there's a lot of money there. The auxiliaries are things like residence and dining enterprises and DAPER, the Department of Athletics, Physical Education. There are a few auxiliaries here. They take in money and they spend the money they take in. So ticket revenues and TV airtime supports DAPER, and room and board charges and summer conference charges are what support residence and dining enterprises. Grants and contracts, federal grants, corporate grants, foundation grants, they come in, they're spent by the faculty. Restricted funds are both expendable money, money we can spend right away, or money that goes into the endowment, but there are very tight restrictions on how it can be spent. So if a donor gives money for a chair in anthropology, that money cannot be used to support the psychology department. It can only be used to support the anthropology department. So there's a lot of restricted money in the budget. Designated funds are funds that come in unrestricted but then are directed or designated to a particular area by a management agreement. The only money that is controlled by the provost is that little piece of the pie there that's pulled out. It's the general funds budget, and it's the only piece of the university's budget that's centrally controlled and budgeted. And the budget process runs like many of the things we've just heard. The departments, the schools, the vice provosts, the vice presidents make budget requests. Those come up to the provost budget group. The budget group hears the entire university's requests, and then they make a recommendation to the provost. The provost makes a final decision. The provost then makes a report to the faculty senate. That report is actually happening this week on Thursday. And then the provost presents the budget to the Board of Trustees, and the board is required to approve the budget before the budget can actually happen. So that will happen in June. So you may ask, what about the students? Well, you know, you are an integral part of what we do. And in many of these different processes we've talked about, there are committees where there's consultation and feedback. The evaluation for tenure and promotion, critical part of the process there. The one process that I could think of where there is a strong tie between students and the administration was the judicial process, the judicial contract, basically, that governs your actions on campus. And the fundamental standard was a creation of David Starr Jordan, the first president. And about 25 years later, students created the honor code. They wrote that for themselves. And there were various different iterations of how the university's judicial processes were enacted. But in 1997, there was a committee of 15. This was a group of faculty, staff, and students, and they drafted a new judicial charter. That charter, when it was complete, went before two student governing bodies, the ASSU and the Graduate Student Council, who had to approve it. And once they approved it, it went to the Faculty Senate. The Faculty Senate then had to vote on it, and then it went to the president, who had to approve it. And any time there is a change in that judicial charter, it has to go through that process. First to the students who have to approve it, then to the faculty who have to vote on it and approve it, and then to the president who has to approve it. So it's a real joining at that point. And that's it, I'm done. Everything here starts at the level of faculty and students. The money that gets raised and spent is mostly at the level of faculty and departments, and the role of the administration is to help this happen. So, the end.
That's okay. Make it work. Yeah. Okay. So there's a pop quiz on all that. No, I'm kidding. There's no pop quiz. That's a lot of information. But the video that was recorded does have all of what was just said, and you do have the slides, right? So I understand that that's a lot of content. Please feel free to get more coffee. That was a lot. Very useful. So I'm going to speak really briefly on the ASSU and the university, right, and different kinds of ways in which students can also engage with this process, just because that's kind of the body that we as students are, I suppose, most familiar with, right? We interact most with the ASSU. So I'll talk a little bit about the ASSU. Okay. So the ASSU is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. It's led by students for students. It's self-governed and is separate from the university. Right? So legally separate from the university. What this means is that the university cannot compel the ASSU to do anything that is not illegal. I messed up with wording there. The university can't make the ASSU do anything, and the ASSU can't make the university do anything either in terms of the organizational structure. So the structure of the ASSU is executive branch, the legislative branch, which is made of the undergraduate senate and the graduate student council, and the business operations of the ASSU, which include the Stanford Student Enterprises. The ASSU is governed by the ASSU Constitution, which is written by the students and controls how the ASSU governs itself. But again, it is not binding on the Board of Trustees, right? And so this is interesting. So if the ASSU Constitution, right, says we can compel the Board of Trustees to do anything, right? That can be written into the Constitution, but that is not legally binding on the Board of Trustees, which is an interesting interplay between these two entities. So the Constitution can be amended, and all amendments are provided to the university president for review, similar to the processes that we were talking about here. The Board of Trustees, again, retains final authority over the university under law and under the founding grant. Okay, so the university will follow the ASSU Constitution to the extent that it does not conflict with the trustees' university policy or law. Okay, so the ASSU Senate Committee on Nominations, NOMCOM, is a fairly powerful branch of the ASSU that has a lot of influence over these different aspects of the university talked about here. So NOMCOM nominates students to university committees, ad hoc committees, and Board of Trustee committees. So more on that. University committees include, for example, the Advisory Panel on Investment Responsibility and Licensing. And the university president writes charges to these committees and appoints members to these committees who are nominated by NOMCOM. So going through NOMCOM is pretty much the means by which you can be nominated to these committees, university committees. There are also ad hoc committees. For example, the long-range planning area steering groups, right? So there's long-range planning going on right now by the university. And university administrators may select individual students at their discretion for these committees. So for example, right, the most recent one, Persis, I think you're involved in the selection for the long-range planning. You're not? Just kidding. Okay, so there are different administrators. Yeah. So lastly, the Board of Trustees committees. Students are nominated by the ASSU or other parties, recommended by the university president, appointed by the chair of the Board of Trustees, and confirmed by the board. So usually for the Board of Trustees committees, there is one undergraduate student and one graduate student invited to annual terms, so they serve for the full year on each of the following committees: Development, Finance, Land and Buildings, Alumni and External Affairs, and the Special Committee on Globalization. So that's a lot of information here. And finally, for the ASSU is invited to several meetings each year of the Faculty Senate, right? So this is kind of the link between the ASSU student body and the faculty. So they're invited to the Faculty Senate to raise issues of concern to students, and they can also bring up discussion topics to the Faculty Senate. Right. I think that's everything.
So it is lunchtime, but before you head to lunch, we have an assignment, which is for the afternoon, we are actually going to have you start to design a change process. And what I'd like you to do as you go to lunch is get some colored dots. Lily will be holding them, and she's got them. There she is. And what we'd like, so there are 4 toy problems that we have set for the afternoon. One is to introduce a new course requirement for Frosh. A second is achieve gender parity on the Stanford faculty by 2025. Third is create a new focused dorm or residence. Fourth is help a department develop a more inclusive culture. We chose these 4 problems because we think you can actually make some headway on both specifying a specific agenda around that and then setting forward a change agenda. I realize this might not be the change agenda that you personally want, but we thought this exercise would be a good way of helping you develop your tools so you can then use those tools for the change agenda that you are most interested in. So the assignment as we go to lunch is, you might be interested in one of these, you might be interested in 2 of them, you might be interested in all 4. As you go to lunch, find some colored dots and put on your name tag 1 or 2, probably it'd be best if you stuck to 2, different colored dots. And by the way, purple is yellow because yellow doesn't work on the screen, so I've used purple for yellow. So choose 1 or 2 dots of the problems you're interested in, put them on your name tag, and then when you get your lunch, sit at a table with 2 or 3 other people, preferably that you don't know, but it's fine if it's people that you do know, and with similar colored dots, because those will then be the 2 or 3 people that you will be working with in the afternoon as we go through a change makers workbook and you actually start to design some change. We were going to want you to work in groups of 3, no more than 4. So that is going to spread us out across these tables. Each table can take 2 groups. So is everybody, any questions about what the next assignment is? Dorica, is it crystal clear?
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone heard the part about you're going to get one workbook for your team, and that's going to sort of guide you through this. We have the colored dots that are out here by the lunch table, so you can just pick them up at that point. One more thing. Okay, this is the instruction sheet in case you have any questions.
Right.
It's all up here with the colors of the dots. One other thing that I want to offer is if you are leaving or whenever you're leaving, we have an app in the front to scan your ID, which makes it so much easier to stay in contact with you and follow up for this.
Right.
Thank you for being here. So just see me on your way out without scanning your ID.
Yeah, and we will appreciate that because we will want to send out a questionnaire afterwards asking what was useful, what wasn't useful, so that if we deem this a success, we will be able to improve it for the next time that we do it. Okay, so lunch is on the table, as they say. In particular, it's not just been learning, there's been some really good ideas that have come out of this. So I would like to suggest for those of you who felt that there were some really good ideas that came out of your groups. There's a couple of things you could do post this activity. One of them is, I would like all of the facilitators to come up front, if you would, all the coaches, so that you can see who the coaches are, because these are now people that you have a shared experience with.
Also, thank you.
And, well, first, thank you, yes. But you have a shared experience with these individuals, and if you have an idea that you think might have legs, these are people who they might be in the lower left-hand corner of not having a whole lot of influence, but they might be very supportive. And as a result, they would be people who would be great to test your idea out on. The second thing is, we're kind of at a unique moment, because normally when you come up with a new idea, you never just throw it over the fence. You have to be the one that really is committed and passionate and pushes it, and that's really what makes things happen, working with people like the people in this room. But we have a long-range planning process going on, and so this is one of those very few moments where if you have a great idea that came out of this, please write it up and submit it to the university-wide long-range planning process. I have heard ideas here today that belong in that process. So please, please, if you are so moved, think about doing that. Planning.stanford.edu. And Megan is the czar. Yes. I think that, wow, I'm not going to say a whole lot more because I just don't even know what to say. This was, for me, phenomenal. I've learned so much throughout this process. I have appreciated the discussions with all of you. And I think that we will be trying to get you some feedback forms, because we'd like to know from your point of view what worked well and what didn't work well. But I can't believe that we don't want to do this again. So I'd now like to turn it over to Derica and Lily for any closing comments that they might have.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just want to thank everyone here. To echo Persis, this was an experiment, right? This was, and I think, an experiment that succeeded really well. I think a lot of us would, hopefully a lot of us agree. And I want to give a few closing statements. So I think what happened in this room today was really valuable, not just for everyone in this room, but also I hope people who are not in this room right now, right? I think the folks who are in this room today learned a lot, right? And I think we also have this ability to talk to the communities we're involved in, right? To talk to our friends, to talk to our dorms, to talk to our organizations, departments, etc., right? The information that was given here today is not exclusive, right? The slides will be posted on Provost's website soon, right? And this is information that I believe everyone should know, right? Everyone should have access to. And as people who are in this experiment today, I think we all have, somewhat of a responsibility, right? To make sure that the good and the work that was done in this room can go bigger. So whether that means talking to some of the coaches, whether that means talking to your friends, whether that means even just sharing the slides, right, with people who might not know about the process, I'm sure every single person in this room learned something today or had something that they thought was true that maybe they revised a little bit, right? And so I think everyone in this university has something to learn, right, from this sort of information, from this event. Yeah, so I'm gonna give another final comment. I think Persis's original statement in the beginning, I wanna go back to, right? The idea that there are folks on the outside that are important, that there are folks on the inside that are important, right? I don't want the takeaway of this event to be everyone go on the inside and do all this official looking stuff, right? That should not be the takeaway, right? The takeaway I would love us to come away from is we need to know how the inside works, whether or not we are on the inside or the outside, right? And so what that means is whether we are planning a protest as I speak, right? Or whether we are trying to work with the folks in the room, right? Both of those are useful. Both of those are highly important and incredibly needed right now, right? And as we said in the beginning of this event, it's not about whether or not you are an activist or are not an activist. It's about how effective you can be. It's about the change you make. It's about the ways you go about that change, right? And I think we all, above all, no matter what we want to do a good job, right? And I think this is universal for Stanford students. We want to do a good job, right? And so hopefully this gives you the tools to get started. This is not everything. We're always in a process, right? There's always learning that will go on. We are all learning. I'm still learning. Everyone's still learning. Persis learned, right? And I'm really excited to see where this takes us, right? I'm excited to see this event happen more. I'm excited to see where y'all will take your conversations and to push and to get things done. And I want to thank everyone in this room again for helping make this first event, this experiment, an amazing success. Thank you.
So there's nothing more to say except thank you so very much for being here. We're pretty humbled by the fact that you showed up and that you stayed all day. That's pretty amazing. I think the only thing that I want to say in closing is that one thing that we hoped you might sort of take away from this, if you were noticing, is that we hoped that this event itself would be an example for you of modeling what we think can be accomplished with a student and a staff person and an administrator. Persis has been so amazing throughout this process in the humility with which she's approached this. Everything from like us arguing about whose name was gonna be on the flyer and her insisting that it be alphabetical. And I'm like, Persis, I'm just here to help. I can't be first. And she's like, yes, you can. Your name is Blackman. I was like, okay. But also that this was Lily's vision. And so there's a lot of cynicism about what students can do, but what we wanted to show you is that we care about your vision, and if you approach us as partners, we really want to make these things come to life because we think you have amazing ideas. And all these coaches around here also stayed all day because they care so much, and they wanted to share in this experience with you. And I just want to infuse a little more optimism about who cares. So thank you all so much for coming.